Welcome to Good Spirit Graphics. In part 4 of the MochaBlend tutorial series, we're going to continue working in the 3D view of Blender. This time we're going to cover shape data and camera solve data. Now let's take a look at what we can do with some shape exports from Mocha. We're going to make a quick track of this car here. This is some sample footage that I downloaded from the Mocha website. Okay, that's good enough for our example. Nothing fancy, just something we can export into Blender. What we're going to do now is save our file and export our shape data. We have the layer we want, Roto Car selected. We're going to select the Nuke Roto Paint export option here and press copy to clipboard. Okay, let's go ahead and set things up. I've opened up a new file here in Blender. We're going to begin with dropping from a folder the first picture in the image sequence from our test footage. And just like before, let's go ahead and set the scene frames here. It's currently set for 250. Let's set it to the number of frames in our image sequence, 24. All right. Now let's go back up here and paste our data in for Mocha. Now the first thing you'll see is Mocha shape data loaded. There's the shape icon, sees our 24 frames, and we have no format information. That's because Nuke Roto Paint doesn't have format exported information. So to get our data in here, what we need to do is one of two things. We'll go ahead and split the window, switch this over to not the 3D view, but let's see the Properties tab. Here we go. Doesn't have to be quite that big. And you'll see our render settings are right here. Now you can either set all this manually, or I like to do things the easy way. So we're going to go back into Mocha briefly, and we're going to export out that format data. So here we are in Mocha. Let's go ahead and export some tracking data first. After Effects transform data, that's the one we want. Copy to clipboard. Let's paste that data in first. All right, now here we have our format, 720 by 486. Now if we paste our shape data in after that, Nuke Roto Paint, you'll see MochaBlend knows not to overwrite this information. It understands what you're doing, and you have the format from your data all loaded in here. So we get a couple little warning messages here. Mocha render mismatch. Let's go ahead and hit import Mocha format. That moved our format information over to here. We will go ahead and create a 2D camera. Now let's bring this data into our 3D view. I'm going to go ahead and close this little panel here. That's part of the movie clip editor window. I'm going to split this window one more time, bring it way over here, and change this to the 3D view. Now we have a lot of stuff in here. It looks like when we created our camera, it looks rather large because we left this on 10:1. So if we want to reset all this, we can just select our camera. Actually, let's select everything by pressing A in the 3D view and pressing delete. We'll get rid of everything. MochaBlend sees that we've lost our camera, so let's go ahead and set it to, say, 100:1. Create another 2D camera. There we go. And we'll press number pad 0 to go ahead and move into that view. Now if we go back down to our clip settings here, press set as background, our test footage will move into our camera view. Go ahead and change the opacity on this again like we did last time. We are looking, we have so many panels open, I can't see what's going on. Let's go ahead and switch to our background panel. Here we go. Change our opacity up to 1. All right, there we go. Now if we move over to the MochaBlend panel, we'll see for shape data, we have this option available to us. We can select either wire or textured. Now what that does is choose the display format of the shapes you bring into the 3D view. You can set these after the fact, but if you're bringing in, say, 20 shapes or more into this 3D view, setting each one individually later can be a pain, so this is kind of a shortcut to set it the way you want. We'll start with wire and press Create Shape Mask. There we go. There is our mat. And now let's go ahead and press Home with our mouse hovering over here. And you'll see that if we move through our view, we have our animated mat from Mocha. Now I'm going to close down this little panel. It's blocking our view of the key press indicator down here, screencast, which shows you what I'm pressing. Now we can do a couple other things here. Let's go ahead and press Home with this centered here. That'll center our footage up. We're going to split this window because I want to take a look at the outliner, which shows all the elements in the scene. And you'll see, we see Roto Car here. That is the name of the layer of our mat from Mocha. You'll also see we have keyframed properties here for visibility of our layer. And if we scroll with the middle mouse wheel here a little bit, and we move out of frame, you'll see our mat disappears. Our footage also disappears, but if we had set our layer position before the end of the mat, you'd see the layer disappear before the footage stopped. Now let's go ahead and delete this curve here, and I'll show you what happens if you select textured. We will get a solid material as the display style, which you can change here on your material settings if you want. Let's go ahead and go to Blender Render to start with. We'll set transparency, set our alpha, set this to textured, and let's set our shading to GLSL again. There, now our transparency shows up in our view here, and you can see our mat is displayed with a material over it. Now what this setting is really doing is if we go to our object properties, you'll see under display, maximum draw type, it's set to textured. If we set it back to wire, that is what setting this before you create your shape does. You create a lot of shapes. It's a lot easier just to set them up correctly here before having to go with dozens of shapes and set them individually to the draw style you want. Now what if we want to bring in multiple shapes into Blender? Let's go ahead and hide this layer. We'll create a couple more. Now let's select all of these layers, press Export Shape Data, and press, we have selected layer. They're also visible, so we'll go ahead and select all visible layers, copy to clipboard, go back to Blender, paste this data in. Let's go ahead and set this to wire and create our shapes. There we go. Now I didn't really set them up so they'd be keyframed correctly. And actually, I forgot to set them to actually follow the track. So let's go back to Mocha. Let's select each one here and set it to car front track. There we go. Now let's select our 5 layers again. Export shape data. Go back to Blender here. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click, Shift, select all these guys here. Press X for delete, get rid of them. Paste our data back in, and you'll see now we have, let's see, 5 shapes. And we should have them animated at this point. There. Now we've brought them in following the front car track. And you'll notice that each of these layers is brought in when you have multiple layers parented to an empty. If we open up the empty, you'll see all our layers with our layer in-out points from Mocha are brought in with their names. Now if we want to render out these shapes, let's just do it the quick way here. I'm going to split this window by grabbing this cross-hatched area, dragging down. Change this over to the UV image editor, and let's go ahead and press either F12 to render, or I'll show you the actual button that does it, which is right here. And you'll see we have our matte. We have transparency on this material. Now if we move our frame to another position, press F12, you'll see we get that image. So that's a quick way that you can get your mattes out in the 3D view. Now some of you may be wondering, why do I want to create mattes in a 3D view in the first place? Well, these don't have to be mattes exactly. You can use these shapes. You can set any kind of material you want on here. This opens up possibilities to put animated lights that are moving in the scene, perhaps using cycles, for example, selecting one of your shapes and putting materials like glass or making them transparent or glossy and rendering them in ways that are not possible in a traditional compositing application. Now let's wrap up this section on exporting shapes from Mocha with a brief recap and a couple of new features. The following properties are exported from Mocha to MochaBlend. They are the layer names, the layer in-out points, the blend mode, which I didn't mention yet because in the 3D view it is not applicable, but in Blender's movie clip editor it is, and also the fill color. Now let's set a couple of these properties and watch them import into Blender. We'll set a couple fill colors here. Let's start with the left headlight. We'll set these to green. Right headlight, also green. Let's set the grills to blue. And we'll set the hood badge to red. Now let's set some layer in-out points. Let's set the left headlight to 5, the left grille to 6, the right grille to 7, and you guessed it, the right headlight to 8. Now I did show you one other thing when I was exporting shapes before. I was selecting them all and then going down to export shape data and choosing between selected layer and all visible layers. Well, selected layer actually only picks the highlighted layer. So even if you have a whole bunch selected, they're not all going to export unless you choose this option, all visible layers, which you will set here. So let's go ahead and copy to clipboard with the Nuke RotoPaint format. I also should mention that to go directly from Mocha to Blender, you will need Mocha Pro because Mocha for After Effects does not have the Nuke RotoPaint export format. Now in Blender, you'll see I have a format already preloaded. As I showed you before, if you export some transform data and get it into MochaBlend first before you paste your shape data, then you won't have missing format data here. Remember, the Nuke format doesn't actually have format data with it. So let's go ahead and paste in our shapes. You'll see we have 6 shapes here. And we'll go ahead and choose textured this time and create shape mask. Now if we move through our scene, you'll see what we have is our headlights and grills popping into view sequentially. That came from our layer in out points. And you'll also see we have all our fill colors. So there you go. That completes this section on exporting shapes from Mocha to Blender's 3D view. Now let's go back to a feature I mentioned in part 1. Now that we've finished the sections on transform data, corner pin data, and shape data, it's time to look at what this function actually does. When you export data from Mocha, the format of the data is tied to the format of the video it was created with. If you want to work in another format, after you've created your data, you can always scale your mats in a compositor, but in a 3D world, that isn't so simple to do. So to help you avoid having to redo your work in Mocha, MochaBlend can reformat your transform data, corner pin data, and shape data to fit any format you want. Let's take a look at an example. We'll go ahead and create our shapes. You'll see they are animated nicely. Then let's go ahead and change to a different format. We've changed our resolution and our aspect ratio here. And the first thing you want to do when you change those is to reset your 2D camera. That clears our camera warning, but we still have a Mocha render mismatch. Let's go ahead and check Convert Mocha Format and create some more shapes and see what happens. There, MochaBlend has reformatted the Mocha data to fit your current Blender settings. Now let's test a Mocha camera solve. We're going to do so by creating some sample footage here. You see we have a camera that's moving in and out over 30 frames in a little 3D setup with some walls, a ceiling, and a floor. If we take a look inside the camera, we'll see our exported footage will look something like this. Now let's take a look at our rendered video inside Mocha. That matches what we saw in the 3D view in Blender. And I went ahead and tracked the left wall and the floor. If I turn on overlays, you'll see the outlines of the track I've done. All right, that's tracking nicely. Now let's go ahead and leave these two selected before we move into the Camera Solve tab here. I happen to know that Mocha will solve this better if I give it a large parallax change. Make sure it does not check for zooming. Sometimes that throws it off. And let's go ahead and see if we can get a solve. Ah, that was fast. Solve quality 99%. Let's go ahead and export this camera data. We're going to use After Effects 3D motion data to bring it into Blender and press Copy to Clipboard. Back in Blender, we're going to be working in the 3D view, but we also want to see what's going on with MochaBlend. So let's go ahead and split our 3D view by grabbing this little cross-hatched area down here, sliding it over, and turning the left side into a movie clip editor. Here's MochaBlend here. Now let's go ahead and paste our data in. And you'll see we have our camera solve data loaded this time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and create our camera solve. Let's go down to Create Camera Solve. And we will select first planes. And you'll see what we get is an empty camera and the two layers that we exported out of Mocha. Now let's go ahead and close down our tool panel here in the 3D view. We don't need that right now. And if we rotate around here, you'll see we can go ahead and scrub the timeline. And you'll see we have an animated camera that is matching the motion, roughly, of what we tracked in Mocha. I say roughly because Mocha's camera solver doesn't give you a 3D track the way Synthesize or some other programs do. It gives you a solution that will put the planes in the exact spot when viewed through the camera. So if we go into the camera view, you will see we have our footage in the background already. And if we scrub the timeline, our blue areas from Mocha, which are 3D objects here, are matching the movement perfectly with the footage. Now these planes we've created are useful for putting a texture on or for using as a particle emitter. But we can also create something else with MochaBlend. If we switch over to empties, we'll hit Create Camera Solve again. And I'll go ahead and select everything in the scene so you can see we now have some empties that are rotated with the plane that they belong to in the scene. Now MochaBlend is smart enough to know not to create another camera, so what you'll find in the Mocha Solve world empty is one camera and then all the objects that have been created. You'll also notice keyframes on the visibility here, so if you scrub the timeline, you'll see that the visibility will turn on and off. Now that is a setting that we can select in the user settings that I'll show you in just a minute. Now let's move out of the camera view now and take a look at how MochaBlend inserted this scene into the world here. You'll see we have our planes with our empties at the corners. These are the corners defined by the blue surface area inside Mocha, the same as for corner pins. And you'll also notice that this plane and the empties are sitting right on the ground plane. Now MochaBlend is going to adjust the world so everything is sitting on the ground plane if you select it in the user settings, but you can also go ahead and grab the Solve World Empty and you can move your little world around and it won't affect any of the movement in the solve. Now where are the user settings for MochaBlend? Well, in version 1 you can find them under User Preferences. Go to the Add-ons tab. We'll go ahead and type in Mocha in the search box. Twirl down the selector here and you'll see we have some user settings as part of the add-on panel. MochaBlend we can set in the 3D view, Camera Solve, Solve World Grounded. That is the setting that made the areas that we exported from Mocha, in this case the four corners of the surface area and the planes, to sit right on the world floor. I also showed you that you can select Keyframe Object Visibility. That sets these to the in-out points for your layers in Mocha. You can also set the style of the empty for the world empty and also for the object style here, which is this, the empties exported at the 4 points of each layer. Now let's get our preferences window back and you can see we have a couple more settings. One is under the objects you can make them face forward, which means when you import your empties into this world here, they will face directly at the camera. If you do not select that, then they will auto-align in the direction of the plane that they belong to. You can also select Minimize, which makes the empties points in case you don't want to see them, you just want the point to place an object. And Auto Size also scales the empties so they look correct in the camera view no matter how far from the camera they are. Now that's important because Mocha exports its data in a format that is not always consistent. If you have a moving object, it may be located very close in here to the camera, while these planes could be way out here. So that option lets the empties appear roughly the same size no matter where they are in the world. Now let's take a look at the sort of thing you can do with the camera solve in Mocha. Here's a shot with a guy running down an alleyway here. There's not much going on in the scene. It looks like he's running away from something. So let's give him something to run away from. I've selected these 3 areas here, which are the floor, the right wall, and the left wall. And if I go ahead and click on these, you'll see these surface areas are going to stick on the walls perfectly. Now I've already used the camera solver here to speed up this tutorial. Done a solve on it, got a good result. And we're going to export this as a camera solve. Now we're also going to export one more thing. I have gone ahead and rotoscoped out his body. And you'll see here, if we turn on that area, we're going to use this to mask out some of the smoke that we're going to insert into the scene. He starts out here, which is going to be behind the smoke, and he moves through the smoke, and we need to correct for that in our final composite. Here's the exported solve into Blender. I'll do a full tutorial on this later, but for now, let's just take a look at what we have. We have the areas on the wall, left, right, and the floor here, which was exported from Mocha. We also have a camera, which is moving through the scene, and you can see I've added a smoke simulation. The camera is moving around nicely, so all these exported areas are sticking nicely. We've used the one on the floor to position where the smoke simulation is, and if we move out of camera view, you'll see what we have is a camera right here that's moving through the scene, a smoke simulation with some turbulence right here. In the movie clip editor, you'll see I've imported the roto work we did in Mocha, and you can see it's following him nicely. I have also imported one other thing, which is a mask that will block out the smoke to make it look like it is behind this wall and drifting past it. And if we turn on overlay, you'll see what we have is, at this point, he's behind the smoke, and at this point, he's in front of the smoke. So we're not going to block any of the smoke here at this point. We'll cover using masks in the movie clip editor in a later tutorial. Now let's look at the final shot. You can see he starts out behind the smoke and then runs through it. But the smoke doesn't just fade as he goes through it, he actually cuts a hole through it. That's done with the turbulence effector in the smoke simulation.